Let's talk about something most people suspect but rarely understand. Cheating doesn't start in a bedroom, it starts in the mind. And while men often get caught because their behavior is loud and impulsive, women are different. They cheat in ways that look like loyalty, feel like normal routine, and seem completely innocent until the truth finally surfaces. If you've ever felt like something is off, but you couldn't point out why, this video will open your eyes. When it comes to understanding how cheating begins, one of the biggest misconceptions is that it starts with physical desire. In reality, emotional disconnection is almost always the first step. For many women, cheating is not an impulsive act. It evolves gradually through unmet emotional needs, repeated frustrations, and silent disappointments that accumulate over time. This emotional gap becomes the space where someone else's presence begins to feel comforting rather than threatening. The deeper the disconnection grows, the easier it becomes for her to seek emotional validation elsewhere without even recognizing how far she is drifting. Emotional disconnection often starts in subtle ways. She may feel like her thoughts aren't valued, her concerns aren't heard, or her feelings aren't taken seriously. She might be physically present in the relationship but mentally detached. This internal withdrawal happens long before she interacts with anyone else. It is a process of losing emotional safety. When a woman feels like she cannot open up without being judged, dismissed, or ignored, she starts looking for emotional refuge, and that refuge may eventually take the shape of another person who simply listens. This process rarely looks dramatic on the surface. Most women don't wake up one day deciding to cheat. It happens gradually, almost quietly. A small conversation with someone at work, a friendly interaction online, a moment of comfort from someone who shows empathy during a stressful day. These seemingly harmless moments become meaningful because they fill a void left unaddressed in the relationship. When she feels emotionally disconnected at home, even minor attention from another person feels amplified. That person doesn't even have to be exceptionally attractive or charming, just emotionally available in the right moment. Another important aspect of emotional disconnection is that it affects her self-perception. She may begin to feel unimportant or invisible. She may question her worth within the relationship. When emotional needs go unmet for too long, it impacts confidence and creates mental vulnerability. That vulnerability becomes the foundation upon which emotional cheating is built. If someone else enters her life and gives her the emotional recognition she has been craving, she becomes receptive to it. Over time, she may start comparing how she feels with that person versus how she feels with her partner, deepening the disconnection even further. It's not just about feeling unappreciated. Sometimes emotional disconnection emerges from routine. Over time, relationships can become predictable, mechanical, or monotonous. The absence of emotional engagement creates silence between partners. In that silence, emotional needs remain unmet. Many women don't communicate this openly, not because they don't want to, but because they feel it won't change anything. When communication feels pointless, emotional distancing becomes automatic. She stops discussing her day, stops seeking comfort from her partner, and stops sharing her inner world. Emotionally, the relationship becomes a quiet place where connection should exist but doesn't. As the disconnection grows, she starts protecting the small emotional satisfaction she receives from outside interactions. This protection is subtle at first. She might respond faster to the person who listens to her better. She might share more personal details with them than with her partner. She might feel that this new emotional presence understands her in ways her relationship no longer does. Without realizing it, she shifts emotional loyalty from her partner to someone else. And once emotional loyalty shifts, the foundation of the relationship weakens significantly. In many cases, by the time physical cheating happens, if it happens, the emotional cheating has been going on for much longer. Physical intimacy becomes the final stage of a process that began with emotional disconnection. The real beginning was not a romantic message or a secret meeting, but the quiet loss of emotional closeness within the relationship. When women begin to disconnect emotionally or form an attachment outside their relationship, the first visible signs appear through subtle behavioral changes. These are rarely dramatic or obvious. Instead, they show up as gentle shifts in daily habits, communication styles, and emotional responsiveness. These changes often escape attention because they don't look like signs of betrayal. They look like someone adjusting to stress, work, or personal space. But in reality, these small shifts create the foundation for emotional secrecy, making them important to understand. One of the earliest indicators is a change in communication patterns. Women who are drifting emotionally tend to communicate differently, not necessarily less, but differently. She may still talk to her partner, but the tone becomes less engaged. Conversations start feeling transactional rather than intimate. She gives shorter answers, avoids deeper topics, or becomes passive during discussions that once mattered to her. Instead of expressing irritation or disappointment, she becomes neutral, almost as if she is emotionally checked out. Partners often misinterpret this as moodiness, stress, or a busy schedule, when it is often the beginning of emotional detachment. Another noticeable shift is in how she manages her personal time. Her routines may become more structured and predictable on the surface, but inside that structure, there's increased privacy. She may start requesting more me time, staying busy with tasks that don't require accountability, or spending more hours on activities she never used to prioritize. She may still be physically present at home, but there is a mental distance that partners can feel even if they can't explain it. This gradual retreat into her own space is one of the most overlooked behavioral changes. Phone-related behavior is another major indicator, and it shows up subtly. It's not always about hiding the phone, it's about small adjustments that seem harmless. She may start placing her phone face down more often, responding to certain messages with extra care, or taking slightly longer to reply to her partner. Notifications may become silent, new passwords might be added for privacy. She may step away to take certain calls or become more protective of her screen when someone is nearby. None of these actions scream cheating on their own, which is why most partners dismiss them, but they signal that communication is being filtered and selectively shared. Her emotional energy also shifts. She might suddenly appear more cheerful, but not because of her partner or the relationship. The uplifted mood stems from emotional stimulation outside the relationship. On the opposite end, she may become emotionally distant, less affectionate, less expressive, and less responsive to her partner's emotional needs. Physical intimacy may not decrease dramatically. In fact, some women maintain the same level to avoid suspicion. The real change is in the emotional connection behind the intimacy. It becomes routine rather than genuine, and the partner senses the difference even if they can't articulate it. Behavior changes also appear in her social patterns. She may start connecting more with certain friends, spending longer periods online, or suddenly taking more interest in her appearance, not necessarily to impress her partner, but to maintain confidence for external validation. She may dress slightly differently, groom more consistently, or put extra effort into looking good on days when she interacts with someone who is giving her attention. These changes don't look suspicious because they can easily be mistaken for self-care or personal growth, but the emotional motivation behind them is different. Another subtle shift occurs in how she reacts to her partner's questions or expressions of concern. Instead of explaining or engaging in discussion, she may become defensive, irritated, or dismissive. A simple question like, "Why were you late?" may trigger an exaggerated response because she is now protecting a part of her life she doesn't want examined. The defensiveness isn't about the question, it's about the fear of exposure. Together, these small, gradual changes create a pattern that reflects emotional redirection. They are not always conscious or intentional. Many women genuinely don't realize how their behaviors shift as emotional attachment moves elsewhere. Technology has become one of the most effective tools for maintaining emotional secrecy, not because it encourages cheating, but because it provides discreet, controlled spaces for communication. When a woman begins forming an emotional connection outside her relationship, her use of technology often shifts in subtle, intentional ways. These adjustments are not always planned or calculated. Sometimes they evolve naturally as she attempts to protect her privacy or manage emotional conversations without triggering suspicion. Understanding the psychology behind these technological choices reveals how emotional cheating becomes easier to hide. The first layer is the use of privacy settings. Most people already use passwords and screen locks, but the behavior becomes more specific when emotional boundaries shift. She may update passwords more frequently, enable biometric locks, or restrict notifications on the lock screen. These actions are justified socially because privacy is normal, but internally, the purpose is to control what her partner can see at a glance. Notification previews that once displayed openly may now be hidden. A phone that previously stayed unlocked around the house may now be locked as soon as it's put down. These changes signal a desire for selective visibility. Another important aspect is the use of secondary communication channels. Many women don't directly hide conversations. Instead, they migrate them to apps that offer built-in privacy. Messaging platforms with disappearing messages, encryption, or archive features become more appealing. Some might create secondary social media accounts, not necessarily under fake names, but under modified identities used to interact freely without the same level of visibility. This doesn't always begin with cheating in mind. It often starts with wanting a place to express thoughts, emotions, or frustrations without judgment. But over time, these spaces become ideal for emotional attachment to evolve. Social media behavior also shifts. Certain connections may be hidden from public view. Story settings may be adjusted to exclude specific people. Direct messages become more active, often with people who offer validation, attention, or emotional comfort. Even small actions like liking posts, replying to stories, or engaging in subtle digital interactions serve as early steps in an emotional bond. Technology makes these interactions feel harmless because they don't look like deliberate romantic advances, but the consistency and emotional tone behind them indicate a deeper intention. Another subtle use of technology involves reframing digital behavior to maintain control. She might start using work or projects as explanations for increased screen time. Work-related chats become convenient covers for personal conversations. Late-night replies are justified as tasks or deadlines. The emotional content of the messages is hidden behind logical explanations. Technology provides the perfect cover story because nobody questions productivity or professional communication. It creates a believable shield behind which emotional secrecy can grow. Women also use technology to manage emotional distance within their relationship. Messaging patterns with their partner may become more structured, less spontaneous, and more formal. They may avoid emotional conversations over text, redirecting deeper discussions to later, knowing later rarely happens. Meanwhile, emotional conversations with someone else become more frequent, more personal, and more detailed. This contrast in emotional availability is a significant indicator of where her attention is being invested. Many women also use technology to manage guilt. Muting the person they're attached to, archiving chats, or deleting messages are ways of convincing themselves that they're not doing anything wrong. These actions help maintain a sense of control over the secrecy and over their own internal conflict. Technology offers ways to compartmentalize emotional connections, creating separate emotional worlds that never overlap. A final layer is the shift in digital habits. She may become more active at unusual hours, post more selectively, or engage in content that aligns with the person she's emotionally connected to. Even the type of content she consumes changes. Algorithms reflect emotional interests, and her digital environment gradually adapts to the new emotional influence in her life. One of the most complex psychological factors behind cheating is the internal justification loop. This loop doesn't appear suddenly. It develops slowly as emotional needs go unmet, communication weakens, and emotional attention shifts towards someone else. For many women, the emotional conflict of engaging with another person creates cognitive dissonance, the tension between their actions and their values. To reduce this discomfort, the mind begins to rationalize behaviors, creating explanations that feel morally comfortable even when the choices contradict personal principles. These justifications create a protective mental layer that allows the emotional bond with someone else to keep growing. The earliest stage of this loop begins with minimization. A woman tells herself that the interaction isn't serious, that it's just talking, or that it's simply friendship. By labeling the connection as harmless, she convinces herself that nothing inappropriate is happening. This self-dialogue is powerful because it allows her to continue the interaction without confronting the emotional implications. Minimization also reduces guilt. If it's harmless, then there's no need to feel bad. This mental narrative becomes the foundation for justifying future decisions. Another common justification comes in the form of emotional comparison. She begins comparing how someone else treats her with how her partner treats her. If the new person listens more attentively or shows empathy she feels she lacks at home, her mind frames the external connection as emotionally necessary. This comparison doesn't always reflect reality. It reflects emotional perception. The mind selectively highlights the positive traits of the new person and the negative traits of the partner. Over time, this reinforces the belief that the external connection is meeting emotional needs that her partner is failing to address. The next stage involves shifting responsibility. Instead of acknowledging her role in the unfolding emotional attachment, she begins to place the blame on the relationship or her partner. Thoughts such as, if he cared, I wouldn't feel this way, or he pushed me into this by ignoring me, become frequent. This shift helps her view her actions as a reaction rather than a choice. It reframes emotional involvement with someone else as a form of escape rather than betrayal. By shifting responsibility externally, she reduces the psychological weight of her actions and avoids confronting the root issues. Another layer of justification involves the illusion of control. She convinces herself that she knows her limits and that she can stop the connection before it becomes inappropriate. Phrases like, I won't let it go too far and I can handle this, create a false sense of emotional discipline. The belief that she is in control allows her to continue nurturing the emotional bond without feeling alarmed. What she doesn't realize is that emotional attachments often deepen unintentionally. By the time she becomes aware of how strong the connection is, the emotional investment is already significant. Women also use justification to protect their self-image. Most people want to see themselves as loyal, moral, and emotionally responsible. To maintain this self-view, the mind creates narratives that separate emotional actions from moral identity. She may tell herself that she deserves attention, that she has been emotionally neglected, or that she is simply exploring her feelings. These narratives preserve her sense of integrity while simultaneously allowing behaviors she would normally disapprove of. Another subtle part of the justification loop is emotional entitlement. She begins to feel that she has the right to seek emotional comfort outside the relationship because her needs aren't being met. This entitlement can become strong when emotional gaps remain unaddressed for long periods. Instead of seeing the external connection as a breach of trust, she sees it as a response to unmet needs. This belief makes the choice feel reasonable rather than harmful. Over time, these justifications blend into a single internal narrative that supports the growing emotional attachment. Each small step becomes easier to rationalize because the previous step already set the stage. Emotional boundaries shift gradually as the mind continuously adjusts the justification framework to reduce guilt and maintain internal balance. One of the most revealing aspects of emotional cheating is how easily it goes unnoticed. Many partners assume that cheating must look dramatic or disruptive, so they expect clear warning signs. They imagine secretive behavior, obvious lies, or sudden emotional changes. But emotional cheating doesn't develop with explosive signs. It grows quietly through patterns that look normal on the surface. This disconnect between expectation and reality is one of the main reasons partners fail to recognize what's happening. A primary factor is emotional familiarity. When partners spend a long time together, they become accustomed to each other's routines, moods, and communication styles. This familiarity creates a sense of comfort that blinds them to subtle changes. If she becomes slightly distant or less expressive, it may be dismissed as stress or fatigue. If she becomes more cheerful because of external validation, her partner might assume she's simply in a better mood. Familiarity removes the instinct to question small behavioral shifts because they don't appear threatening or unusual. Another reason partners don't catch emotional cheating is the assumption that loyalty is guaranteed. Many people believe that love, commitment, and shared history automatically protect the relationship. This belief creates a false sense of security. When someone assumes their partner would never do something like that, they stop paying attention to emotional shifts. They don't observe patterns closely because they trust the foundation of the relationship. Trust is important, but blind trust makes subtle signs easy to miss, especially when emotional cheating stays hidden behind everyday interactions. Partners also often rely on stereotypes to identify cheating. The belief that women express everything openly leads many to assume that if something was wrong, she would communicate it directly. But emotional cheating thrives in silence. Women who are drifting emotionally don't always express dissatisfaction because they have already detached or because they fear conflict, judgment, or further disappointment. This silence creates the illusion that everything is fine. The absence of complaints is mistaken for emotional stability, even though it may actually be emotional withdrawal. Another important factor is emotional bias. When someone loves their partner, they naturally want to interpret their actions in the best possible way. They overlook red flags because acknowledging them creates emotional pain, fear, or insecurity. The mind protects itself by choosing comforting explanations. If she becomes protective of her phone, it's easier to assume she is stressed. If she becomes quieter, it's easier to believe she is tired. Emotional bias minimizes discomfort by avoiding the possibility of betrayal. This defense mechanism makes subtle signs nearly invisible, even when they accumulate over time. Many partners also struggle to recognize emotional cheating because they expect physical evidence. They are watching for physical distance, suspicious behavior, or explicit messages. But emotional cheating doesn't always express itself physically. It may not involve late nights, secret meetings, or sudden absences. The emotional shift happens internally. The connection grows through conversations, shared thoughts, and emotional support. This makes detection difficult because nothing outwardly appears inappropriate. Everything seems normal, even though the emotional loyalty is slowly shifting elsewhere. Another aspect that contributes to emotional blindness is inconsistent checking. Many partners rarely analyze emotional patterns or observe changes in communication. They become comfortable with routine and assume the emotional climate of the relationship remains stable. Without regular emotional check-ins, small changes go unnoticed. A shift in tone, reduced interest, or a decrease in emotional availability may not feel significant when viewed in isolation. But these small changes, when left unexamined, become opportunities for emotional attachments to grow outside the relationship. Partners also underestimate the role of emotional substitutes. A woman may not hide her external conversations because they look harmless. They may involve topics that appear friendly or professional, not romantic. This creates confusion for the partner, who sees nothing that resembles cheating. Emotional cheating masks itself behind interactions that appear socially acceptable. Without understanding emotional boundaries, partners misinterpret these connections as harmless friendships rather than potential threats. All these factors, familiarity, assumptions, bias, and lack of emotional monitoring, create the perfect conditions for emotional cheating to remain hidden.